Hello, everyone. I'm Talaya Dendy, and you're listening to Navigating Cancer Together, the show that has something for everyone facing cancer. Why? Because everyone is different with different needs, beliefs, and perspectives. Thank you for joining us for this episode. I encourage you to open your minds and your hearts. Navigating Cancer Together is everywhere. Make sure to subscribe and follow the show to stay updated on our latest episodes. Please listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or your preferred podcast app or platform. I want to give you a heads up for anyone listening. I want you to think about this question as you're listening to this conversation. And the question is, what were you able to take away from this episode that can help you along your breast cancer journey? For those of you who have experienced breast cancer, if you could share one piece of advice with someone who is newly diagnosed with breast cancer, what would that advice be? Again, what were you able to take away from this episode that can help you along your breast cancer journey? And for those who have already experienced breast cancer, if you could share one piece of advice with someone who is newly diagnosed with breast cancer, what would that advice be? Or tips, respond via email at nctpodcastfan@gmail.com. You can also leave your comments on Spotify or LinkedIn. Again, the email is nctpodcastfan@gmail.com. Now, on to why we're here today. Our very special guest is Erica Neubert Campbell. She is a writer and longtime cancer advocate who speaks the vocabulary of cancer. Did you hear that? Vocabulary of cancer from multiple perspectives. Erica is a breast cancer survivor who unfortunately lost her mom to the same disease. In her debut memoir, The Mastectomy I Always Wanted, interesting, Erica combines authenticity and vulnerability with practical advice for the mastectomy journey. She joins us today to share her personal experience navigating breast cancer, treatment options, emotions, and so much more. As Erica shares her stories and experiences, feel free to take what you need. Erica, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome.
Thank you so much, Talaya, and thank you to all of your listeners. I'm really excited about this conversation.
I am so excited to have you here, Erica. You have so much to share. I can't wait for the listeners to hear all of your thoughtful insights, your perspective, all of it. It's so important. But before we really dive in, Erica, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling much better now. I find this experience to be grounding and reminding me of what's most important after a frazzled day. I'm sure many people can relate to that.
Absolutely. I'm so happy that, you're feeling more grounded. This is a safe space. So just sit back, relax, and let's dive into this beautiful conversation we are going to have. Erica, for the people that are not aware, you are the executive director at Pinky Swear Foundation. It is a foundation focused on providing financial support to children and families facing cancer. And ironically, you were diagnosed with breast cancer during your first year working there. Please explain what you do there and what you love about the organization.
I am so grateful. This is a really important question because what I do in my day job is my life purpose, but it bleeds into so much more. So, as you said, Pinky Swear Foundation, we help kids with cancer and their families with financial support, meaning we will pay for housing, transportation, food, whatever a family needs to really focus on what's most important, which is the health of their child. We want to take away that financial burden and allow them the freedom to really be present with their kids, to really support that health journey and support the family. And you're right, you know, in my first year of this amazing job that I think is my calling, I then get diagnosed myself with cancer. And, that's why I say I have the vocabulary of cancer because I was very familiar with breast cancer when my mom was diagnosed. Then I was familiar with all cancers through my work at Pinky Swear Foundation. And then getting diagnosed myself, I learned so much about the disease and all diseases, not just, again, what the medical piece of it is, but the emotional side of it too. I came at it from a caregiver, from a leader, and then as a patient. So multiple vocabularies got developed over time.
Thank you so much, Erica, for the important work that you do. I love how you are taking your experience and helping other people through their journeys as well. I do have a very interesting question, Erica, and it is, what are some of the things that parents share with you when they come in for support?
They share so many vulnerable things. I think the one that stands out for me the most is that it's really hard to ask for help and admit that you need help. And that really landed for me, particularly, not only as a caregiver, but also as a patient. And sometimes there can be shame associated with asking for not just help, but even financial help. And that's what I love about Pinky Swear Foundation. And frankly, lots of other nonprofit work is, we can't cure cancer yet. I would say yet, but this is something we can do, is that I can provide that desperately needed financial support to a family when they need it most, which is right now. I can give them that gift. And also, we make our work accessible, easy to apply, and again, taking away any of the burdens associated with asking for help, getting financial support. A lot of people, of course, naturally, when they hear a kid diagnosed, they want to provide food, or they want to provide a teddy bear, or they want to provide, an experience. And this is something that doesn't always get filled, which is paying someone's rent, paying their mortgage, paying their grocery bill, paying for their car payment, again, allowing them to take time away from work even to be with their child. So I love the direct impact. I love the action orientedness of it, because I know we all feel this way when we hear about someone's diagnosis, whether it's a kid or an adult. You want to do something. You want to help. And this is a really tangible way to help. So that's what I love about it. And parents just share with me, they're really terrified of the next step. They share with me the shame they may feel about asking for help, but also they also feel alone, and we let them know they are not alone.
That is so important. Just knowing that someone is there to listen to you, to hear you, because a lot of people feel unheard. Erica, I heard you mention accessible. Is Pinky Swear available just to people locally, or is it a national organization?
It's a national organization, and the reason is cancer doesn't know a zip code. We started out locally based, but then we found so many families traveling to other locations, to other states, to really get the best possible care for their child. Or alternatively, we found people coming to us locally here in Minnesota. We've got incredible health care here. They were relocating here to get the best care. And so, really opening it up to anybody in a cancer journey, childhood cancer journey, we found that to be really important, to be able to be accessible, as you said, and to really support people wherever they are, wherever they live, and whatever they do.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for that important work. Erica, if someone out there is listening, they have a child who's been diagnosed with cancer, where can they learn more about Pinky Swear?
Absolutely go to our website, which is pinkyswear.org. And in the top right corner is a button that just says apply for support. It's a part of our accessibility that we actually translate our application into multiple languages. And it's a very short application. Again, we really want to make sure we reduce the administrative burden. We want to let families get on their way and get the care they need and get the time they desperately need with their child.
Wonderful. So, if you are someone out there listening and your child has been diagnosed with cancer, please reach out to Pinky Swear. I will have that information in the show notes as well, so you can have easy access to it. Erica, let's talk more about your personal life and your personal journey with breast cancer. All of us change throughout life. However, I personally believe that cancer expedites that change. Who is Erica at this time, in this moment? And how have you changed? How has cancer changed you?
What a beautiful question. reflecting just quickly back on the children with cancer that I work with, talk about exponential change. I find such incredible maturity that is so advanced in some of those kids. They provide advice and guidance to me as an adult because I think cancer really just matures somebody, in a way that, changes kids. But it changes me too. And I think one of the biggest changes is that I am far more compassionate about struggles for other people, but also far more open to authenticity and vulnerability than I ever have been. Because, I mean, you know this, you can, when you experience your own low points, your own messiness, your own challenges, I think there's so much power in sharing them. Like there's power, and I think vulnerability is a superpower. I've never been more open and more real than I am now. Right? We all have these masks that we put
Mhm.
on probably in our, younger life and our younger self. Even when my mom was sick, I would I was in my 20s when my mom was sick, and I definitely led a dual life, right? I led this life where I was trying to be a career woman, I was trying to date and find love and, find a boyfriend or a husband, but at the same time I was filled with grief and sadness about my mom, and I kept those two worlds separate. If I could go back, I would not have kept them so separate. So today I am far more open to letting my real self be exposed and even the hard, messy parts. I got nothing to hide, everybody, when you've been through some really challenging times, you just realize that everybody has those challenging times too. And that's where we get power is when we share them with each other.
I agree so much. Just sharing your story. You never know who it's going to help. If it helps one person, fabulous. I believe that we go through these things to be able to guide and support other people as well. So, thank you for your vulnerability. You have a lot of humor too, as well, which we'll get to a little bit later. But yes,
Totally. Yes. Yeah. Life's too
wonderful.
short not to laugh, right? And laugh
That's
at yourself.
that's the truth. I think I've laughed at myself more since being diagnosed with cancer than ever. So,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I don't know about you, but sometimes, I'll be talking with my family and I'll think back to a time and I'll say, remember that time when, I was going through cancer and this thing happened? And I'll share the story and I'll say, well, it wasn't funny then, but it is funny now. And just
Yes,
that's healing to me. Yes.
completely agree. Completely agree.
Erica, please walk us through how you learned you had breast cancer and how you shared the news with your children and other people in
Mm.
your life.
Phew, yeah, gosh, bringing me back to those memories. After my mom died, I was probably, very fearful that I was going to someday possibly get breast cancer, right? I'd seen what the disease had done to her. And even though I had been tested for genetics, I was really concerned that I would get diagnosed myself. And so I was in my 30s and I advocated for early detection for a really long time. Right now, the average age for women to start getting mammograms is age 40. But in my 30s, I was like, no, no,
Mm.
I want to start getting mammograms now. And sure enough, I had what I describe as quote scary mammograms because, you know, doctors would say, "Ooh, you have some dense breasts. It's kind of hard to see things. We think we see something. Come back in 6 months." Or, "How about you have an MRI or an ultrasound?" And so I went through, no joke, 15 years of these repetitively scary mammograms experiences. And so, at the time when I was finally, I put this in quotes too, finally diagnosed, I had been asked to come back, which I'd been through before. So mentally I was like, yeah, that usually happens. I get called back. And this time they said, yeah, let's skip the MRI and let's go straight to a biopsy. And
Mm.
that's when the record stopped. I was like, wait, what?
This
Normally
is
you
different.
Yeah, normally y'all call me and say to come back for an MRI, or normally y'all call me and say we got to do an ultrasound, but I'd never done a biopsy. And so that one took my anxiety up a notch or two. And so I was at work at Pinky Swear Foundation, and I had been so anxious about the results of that biopsy because, this was a new test. It's one I'd never done before. And they said, oh, it's going to be a couple days. I'd been waiting 5 days. I got
Mm,
to the point where I was like holding my phone, like you're in work meetings or you're like walking around the aisles of a supermarket. And you're like holding your phone and making sure it still
mm,
works. And 4 o'clock on a Friday, the phone rings. I'm in a meeting. I tear out. I find an office. I close the door. And the nurse practitioner says, are you sitting down and do you have paper?
mm,
And that's when I just sort of knew, obviously.
mm,
And she cut to the chase and told me that it was breast cancer. And I wrote it down on the piece of paper, and that's about all I remember. And that's about all I wrote down. Because at that point, the anxiety, the fears, the worries that had been accumulating for nearly 15 years all flooded right in that moment. And I held it together, hung up the phone. And she said, okay, on Monday, we're going to call you back and we're going to, set up a whole bunch of appointments. So have a nice weekend. Right.
how?
How? Hung up the phone, called my husband. And that's when I really broke down because
Mm.
having to actually, as opposed to being the recipient of the news, to having to turn and then deliver the news, that changed me. And that's what broke me, was having to use the words with my husband and saying, I have breast cancer. And I just lost it then. We took a day or two to then wait to tell my children because I wanted to get my bearings together. And my kids were young at the time. My daughter was 8, my son was 5. So we had to explain to them in really age appropriate ways, which is really hard because, a 5-year-old is different than an 8-year-old.
Mhm.
And, my daughter was the 8-year-old. She's a little bit older. She understood. She may not have totally knew what cancer was, but she knew that my mom, Grandma Joan, died of cancer, and she got really nervous about it.
Mhm.
And I had to explain to her, I'm going to be okay, but there's going to be some surgeries and we're going to do some things. And I don't know that it really hit her until I actually had some procedures done, but we were honest with them because I think that's the most important thing to do, but in an age appropriate way.
I can only imagine how tough that had to be. It's hard to share that news with other adults, but your
Yes.
children, what is the deal, Erica, with calling people on a Friday? I had the same thing.
Right?
I'm like, so you're
Right?
just gonna dump this and leave this on me all
Yes.
week?
Yes. I'm like, y'all have had 5 days. Could you have called me on Thursday?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, in some ways, I was at least glad to know, but then I had to
Yes,
wait until Monday. And so
right.
it was equally challenging.
And I don't know about you, but for me, it was the longest weekend of my life.
Yeah.
Like the weekend never went so slow ever. So,
Yes. Yeah. And your mind, I mean, I would say to people when they're newly diagnosed, the waiting is the worst because when you have to wait, your mind, even though you try to stay positive, you try to stay distracted, your mind goes into like really deep, dark places. And without information, without a clear next step, without the next doctor appointment, without the next decision, you can just go real spiraled into like, what is this? I mean, I thought it was the beginning of the end. I
mhm.
thought I was going to die in 6 months, right? And then of course, you go to Monday morning and they say, okay, well, here's the treatment plan or here's the next step. And you feel a little bit better. But that waiting and the anticipation is actually far worse than the news and the decision, in my opinion.
I agree. Did you find the fear getting worse, or did you find it easing up as you went through your cancer journey?
Really interesting question. I think the fear grew up until the point I had the double mastectomy because, in that early phase between being diagnosed and then having that surgery, number one, you have to make a lot of decisions. You have to hear all of the risk factors. You have to hear all of the ways this can go wrong or, the promises they won't make and the
Mhm.
statistics. and the percentages and the what ifs, that grew over time. And I think also what grew over time was even telling people, having to verbalize it, and then also trying to learn about what the surgery was going to be. And I can tell a whole story about that. I did have some moment where I did have a moment of hope in there, and I can tell you about that in a minute. But I will say that after the surgery, when I woke up, then you're focused on healing as opposed to worrying about how bad it's going to be. So I think the fear increased up until the point when I'd had the surgery. But there was a really hopeful moment that if you want, I can tell you about too.
Absolutely. Please share.
Yeah. So I had come to the decision after long conversations with my doctor and nurses to have a double mastectomy, right? And that is the more aggressive approach because my breast cancer was diagnosed at an early stage, but I felt really, really confident in that decision. But as you can imagine, I still don't know what that's going to be like. And so I really worried about it naturally. But when I told my team, so I was at, obviously at Pinky Swear Foundation, I had a team meeting. I told them I'm going to be out of the office for 4 to 6 weeks recovering. And then afterwards, there was a woman who just started in our office. Like she just joined the organization. She pulls me aside and she whispers, she's like, "Hey, I have had a similar double mastectomy 5 years ago. Do you want to see what it looks like? Do you want to see my breasts?" And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, this is a professional workspace. I don't know you very well. This is weird, but yes, I do. Yes,
Hmm.
I do. Because I wanted to take away some of that fear.
Yes.
So, we went to a work bathroom, like off the beaten path, locked the door. She takes off her shirt and she shows me her reconstructed breasts, right? She had had reconstructive surgery too. Oh my gosh, her breasts look so real. Her scars were so faint.
Mm.
And I was like in disbelief. I was like, "Are you sure that you've had the same surgery that I'm about to go through?" And she was like, "Absolutely." And that was the one point that I actually had hope. That was the
Mm.
one point because I was like, "Oh, okay. This is going to be a challenging surgery. This is going to be removing an entire like body part that I've had for, 45 years or whatever, but I'm going to be okay." And she really just talked me off the ledge.
Yeah.
She was like, "Okay, it is going to suck." She's like, "You are going to be in pain. You are going to be in discomfort. It is not going to be great, but it is going to get better and you will look like this when it's over." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." And
Wow.
it changed my entire mindset. It really did. So, like, that was the one relief from fear that I had because I was like, "Oh, okay, I can see what's going to happen." Right? Like a doctor can tell you until they're blue in the face that it's going to be okay, but until you see it,
Hmm.
and no offense, but my surgeon was a man. I was like,
Hmm.
"Well, you don't have breasts. I do. So
Right.
you can tell me what it's like, but I'm not sure you totally know." And to have another woman share that with me, completely, completely life changing. And I thought that was super vulnerable.
Right.
Back to when we started, I was like, "Oh my gosh, that is amazing that this woman I barely knew was willing to be courageous enough to be extremely vulnerable to really reach out and support me." That I thought was just phenomenal.
That really was phenomenal. And if more people could just be more open about these things, there would be so many less people who are walking around with like heavy, heavy burden of uncertainty and dread. What I heard you say, Erica, is that because this woman was so kind and so gracious to show you the outcome, it removed a lot of that uncertainty that you had to be able to actually see where
Yeah,
she was now. And you were able to see yourself in that. Is that a fair assessment?
100%. I think,
Okay.
you know, what we all want in life is, certainty and control, right? I don't know about you, but that's
Yeah.
kind of what I love.
Yeah.
And when you have a breast cancer journey or any kind of health journey, any cancer, that control and that certainty is taken away. And that's, I think, where, fear comes from. Fear comes from the unknown. And that's why, your mind goes into dark places because you don't know. And, as much as you can read about it, as much as somebody can tell you and give you words of encouragement, for me, seeing the other side and meeting somebody that had been where I was 5 years ago, I was like, oh God, thank you. Thank you. Thank
Mm.
you. And yeah, that reduced a little bit of fear. Okay. So, truth is, did I still have fear going into a surgery? You bet.
Yes.
Do not think that I walked into that hospital with my, shoulders head, my head held high. But I was like, I was a little bit more grounded and like,
Hmm.
okay, all right, I have to walk through the dark tunnel, but now there's a light on the other side.
So important. Erica, did she share how long after her surgery, how long it was between, then and how she was standing before you?
She did. And she also, she had written up a document of like all of these tips, and she had things that I should make sure that I buy, things like it's going to be hard to raise your hands over your head for a while. So only buy shirts that you can like zip up or button up so you don't have to pull them over your head. She suggested I buy a certain pillow and, just some really practical tips that I was like, "Oh my god, thank you." And I found that to be so, so helpful.
Thank you for sharing that. How can women feel confident in their decision to choose a mastectomy?
When I have talked to women who are facing this choice, I mean, typically when you're newly diagnosed, and to be honest, this is not the choice that every woman gets, but often you get a choice, especially if it's early stage, to choose between a lumpectomy and a mastectomy. So the lumpectomy is where they just take out, as it says, a small lump, like where the tumor is and the surrounding tissue, where you can keep your real breasts. And typically it's followed up with some radiation or some, other kinds of, treatment. And then, of course, the double mastectomy is far more invasive. It's removal of your real breasts. And I think in that moment, it can feel really scary because that sounds more invasive, like a bigger deal, and it
Mhm.
is. But when you asked, how can women feel confident in that decision? The thing that I hate to say this, but I will. I love my double mastectomy and I love my
Mhm.
reconstructed breast. I feel really confident in it because I have a new mental toolbox, meaning I don't have real breasts anymore, but therefore I cannot relapse with breast cancer.
Mm, mhm.
Right? It is, I mean, of course, there's like a, incredibly minutia percentage chance, but when women are faced with that decision, I want them to think not just about the immediate moment, right? The immediate moment in front of you is I could have the small lump taken out and I'd be, back at work the next day or back with my family the next day, or I have this surgery that takes 4 to 6 weeks. That's presented to you. And I want women to think about the long game, right? So the long game for me is that it's over. I
Mhm.
don't have real breasts. I can't relapse. But with a lumpectomy, you are under then a lifetime of scrutiny in terms of you have a chance of a relapse. And of course, doctors will say that you have an equal chance of, they catch it all and they take it all out, but you have to worry. You have to go
Yes.
get mammograms. You have to have what I call scanxiety,
Mm,
right? It's
yeah.
the right. Y'all know
Yes.
what that is. That is
Mhm.
the week before and the week after when you're waiting for the results. That scanxiety follows you the rest of your life.
So true.
Um, and so I just really want to encourage women to think about the long game and the mindset. So I want women to feel confident if it's presented as a choice to choose the mastectomy because you're not just choosing the physical health of your body, which may have equal risks in terms of relapse, but I want you to choose the long term mental health for yourself and what that looks like for you. And if you're willing to manage that fear in a healthy way, then it's okay to have that lumpectomy. But for me, I knew that I was done with the scanxiety and I didn't want to worry about it for the next 30, 40, 50 years. And so that's where, advances in medicine, double mastectomy, and I would say advances in reconstructive surgery
Yes.
Talia, I look exactly the same. I know this is an
Wow.
audio podcast, but I would show you my breasts if you I wear the same bathing suit. I literally wear the same bathing suit and you cannot tell.
Wow.
I wear the same dresses and you cannot tell the difference. And that's the stuff that doctors don't always talk about. I look just as much of a woman than I did before my surgery. And I just want people to know that. Again, I want people to see the long game. And that's what I saw from this woman, who showed me her breasts in the future, right? I mean, that was really supportive. And so I just want women to really think about the long game and their mental health beyond the diagnosis.
As I hear you talking, Erica, it sounds like, from my perspective, the woman who showed you her breast showed you what was possible.
Yes.
And you were like, well, that worked for her. So that can work for me too.
Yeah.
Did you ever consider going flat? I know for some people that's controversial. So did that
Mhm.
ever cross your mind at all?
Yeah. I have had so many fantastic conversations about this. And, you know, when I was diagnosed and I was in these decision making meetings with my doctor and surgeon, if I'm being honest, I don't know that I was ever fully presented, or I don't remember being presented with flat as an option, right?
Mm,
It was sort of like, okay, you've chosen the double mastectomy. What kind of reconstruction would you like? Right. And I was like, okay, the kind that looks good. And so I don't remember, and it's possible we had this conversation with my surgeon, but I don't specifically remember ever having that you can go flat option. I don't know how much your listeners know about the reconstructive process, but with the mastectomy, they'll remove your breasts and then they put in what's called an expander. And so I didn't walk out of that surgery with the same breasts, right? I had to have my skin stretched and expanded over time.
mhm,
So I started out flat. So, for the months right after my surgery, I was flat for a really long time. And you're going to laugh. I was kind of like, I don't look so bad, right? Like
mhm,
I thought, I don't know that I want to go through this expansion process anymore. I don't know that I want to go through this. Like, there's a second surgery to get some implants put in. There was a point, and I write about this in my book where I was like, man, I wish I had chosen flat.
mhm,
And,
mhm.
this train had left the station for me a little bit, right? I already had the expanders in,
Yeah.
but it was surprising to me. You feel like, oh, I'm not going to feel like a woman. I'm not going to look like a woman. But I had to live my life and go, like, live normally for several months flat. And I got used to it and it was totally fine. And nobody,
Uh,
like, it's not like I got stares from anybody or everyone kind of like, looked at me funny. And so I've had some powerful conversations with women since then who actually did make that choice to remain flat. And I see their perspective, right? I do have implants in my body. They are foreign objects, and sometimes people ask me what they feel like. And I describe them as a necklace that I can't take off.
mhm.
Do you ever have like
Yeah.
a heavy necklace that you wear because it's really pretty? And then at
Yeah.
the end of the night, you're like, oh my God, get this thing off of me.
Yes.
Right. Sometimes that's what my implants feel like. And it's not good or bad, right or wrong. But I really deeply respect the women and the friends that I have that chose flat. And in fact, there's a very accomplished and seasoned model that I'm friends with. She's like a Victoria's Secret model. And she had some complications with her implants, but she is a flat chested model, right? And she
Wow.
is such a powerful advocate. And of course, she was a model before her breast cancer and she became a model afterwards. And she is celebrated for her flatness and she wears like flat bathing suits in runway shows. And, she's really changing the face of what it's like to be flat. And she said she's happy with her body just the way I am. So I think it doesn't matter what you choose. I think as long as you're happy with it and you're comfortable with it and there's no right or wrong, and I respect both choices.
I love what you just shared, Erica. Thank you. What I heard you say was that, it's about what works best for you.
Correct.
And there's no right or wrong way. There's no right or wrong choice, which I love. I believe that you have option A, B, C, whatever, but neither one of them is the wrong choice. Another thing that I think is so interesting is that I have talked to a number of other women who have, had breast cancer, and they also said that they were not presented with the option of choosing to go flat, remain flat. And one woman said to me, I think it's because a majority of the surgeons are men,
Yes.
and because of the societal norms of what a woman should and should not have, or
Agreed.
should and should not look like. What are your thoughts on that? I think it's so interesting because you're not the first woman to say this. One woman flat out said, nope, I was not presented with it. And when I went back to ask questions, the surgeon was like, no, that's probably not something you want to do.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't have a recollection of having like an in-depth conversation with my surgeon, who,
Yeah.
like I said, was a man.
Yeah.
And actually, he was a fantastic doctor. So I will never say anything bad about him. I really
Absolutely.
won't. I
Yeah.
really, really won't. He was
Yeah.
phenomenal. But it's true. I just felt like it went from, okay, you're having a double mastectomy. Which of the options about reconstruction do you want? It skipped over the flat piece.
Yeah.
And, I think I respect my doctor so much. Like I said, I won't say anything bad about him,
Yeah.
but I do think there's an assumption about what women would want to quote feel normal, feel back to themselves. And, you know, hmm, my mom, I talk about, she died of breast cancer. She chose a lumpectomy.
Hmm.
And, as you may have guessed, her cancer came back. She relapsed several times. And there are many people that said, after the course, hindsight's 2020, but they said if she'd had a mastectomy when she was first diagnosed, she may be with us today.
Hmm.
And we knew that information probably towards the end of her life. And so I asked her this question. I said, sort of in maybe my naive younger self, I probably wouldn't have asked this today, but I said, Mom, why didn't you choose a mastectomy back then? And she said, I wanted to keep my femininity. I wanted to keep my breasts. I wanted to remain, as beautiful as I felt I was before. And, that haunted me for quite some time. I've certainly come to peace with it. She made the best decision she could have at the time. I don't fault her for it. But, when it came my time to make that decision, I definitely chose a double mastectomy. That was going to be really clear for me to really rewrite that story. But I remember thinking, I can still be feminine and I can still look good. I'm just going to do it in a different way. And that's the conversations that I did have with my surgeon. And he assured me, and he was right. He was like, I can make your breasts look like they do today. And he did. Right. I told you I wear literally the exact same bathing suit. And it's a bikini. I'm like,
Hmm.
because I want to and you can't tell. And so I'm grateful that I have now these, fake breasts that do look great. I think I would have been just fine being flat too.
Hmm.
And, you know, there are societal norms, but I think the world has changed, certainly since my mom was diagnosed. I think it's far more accepted these days to be flat.
Yeah, I agree. And it's not about bashing doctors. I think the key message is understanding what's available to you and having those options clearly presented. And you said a very key word, assumptions. Sometimes assumptions are made, especially if you're at a particular age too.
Right.
That, well, this is still a young woman, she
Yeah.
probably wants to have breast.
Yes.
And that would be a fair assumption. So I think the key is really just understanding and knowing and presenting all the options that are available so people can make informed decisions.
Exactly. And I think there's so many choices that come at you, but to really spend more time on that choice, I think would be well served for women to have that opportunity.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience and how you came to the conclusion of what was best for you, because I really think it's important for people to not only know what you chose, but understand how you got there. So that's important. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I would never. I usually stop one step short of recommending everybody get a double mastectomy because I do know, and I very much respect everybody gets to make their own choices. Everyone has their own journey, and I just get to share my experience, and it was a good one for me. But to your point, it was the one that was right for me. It may not be right for everybody.
Absolutely. You just mentioned your mother. Well, we've touched on your mother a little bit so far. You describe her in your book as a humble leader and powerful guardian angel. Sadly, she passed away from breast cancer. How did her passing impact your beliefs about compassion and trust?
Ooh, that is such a wonderful question.
Thank you.
Oh, my beliefs about compassion and trust. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I did describe and I still my mom was such a humble leader. She worked at a company for many years and she was always the one that would hire a lot of women that were out of luck, down and out, and she would always fight for them. She would fight to get them health insurance. She would fight to get them, a bonus. She was just that person that she was kind of short, but and kind of quiet, but when she spoke, you knew that you were going to go with what, Joan said, but she really fought so hard for other women, and I loved that about her, and she was so humble about it, right? And I think it stemmed from what you just said is her compassion. She understood that we are all equal and we all need somebody to help us along the way, and, I was often in the hospital with her. I would even spend the night in the hospital with her. I just I didn't want to leave her alone. And so I would like share the twin bed with her. So we would end up like walking the halls late at night. And she was also quite social and she knew everybody on this oncology floor. And to watch her just sit with other women who maybe were, unable to walk, right? Unable to get out of their beds, she'd go and sit on their bed and sit at the end of the bed with her own IV pole, her own chemo drip going, and just demonstrate such compassion to other women that that opened up my eyes to like, we all have a struggle and we all can be there for someone. So I do think that, you asked me about how I'm changed. I am far more compassionate based on what I saw from her and also from her experiences. And, the trust piece. Oof. You know, throughout her journey, there were some questions about her care and things like that. And she would say, I trust my doctors. I trust them. And it was hard for me to trust because I didn't know them. I wasn't always in her meetings with her. But again, when it came my turn,
Mhm.
even though her journey did not end the way we all would have liked it, I did make the conscious choice to trust my physicians. And maybe I'm just a naturally trusting person, but you know, a lot of people say, get a second opinion or make sure you trust your care team. I totally agree that. I did go on my gut instinct that I
Mhm.
trusted the physicians that I chose. But if I didn't, I would have absolutely gotten a second opinion or changed or, you know, sought different care options. But I did lean into the trust piece. And one of the things I talk about a lot is not only trusting physicians, trusting your care team, but trusting yourself. That is the biggest piece.
Mhm.
Trusting yourself, that small voice in your head, you got to listen to it. You got to turn up the volume on that one in any cancer journey.
How did you do that, Erica?
I did a lot of journaling, a lot. And this is a really funny story is that I had been given advice when I was newly diagnosed. Someone was like, you should journal. I rolled my eyes first. I was like, how on earth is that going to help me? And I was first really resistant to it. And then finally, this person was like, no, seriously, that's how you're going to find out your true feelings. That's how you're going to process your thoughts and emotions. And that's how you're going to build trust in yourself. And I was like, okay, let me try. But I didn't have a journal in the house, right? I didn't own one because didn't really believe in journaling.
Mhm.
So I ended up like stealing my 8-year-old daughter's diary that she'd been given for a Christmas present that she never used. So it was like this teal and silver glittered journal that I was writing in. And I'll swear, at first I was like, this isn't going to work. But over time, I loved it because it was helping me process. It's helping me figure out what I really thought, helping me trust myself. And, it's almost like I had aha moments with my own self just by writing things down. And that's what ended up being a lot of the words in my book came straight from that journal. But that's how I learned to trust myself because I would like process little moments or things that people would say to me, and whether I agreed with them or I didn't agree with them, or whether I felt those things made me feel better or they made me feel worse. And I was able to just really reflect on them. And that's how I turned up the volume on what was right for me.
Mhm.
And I don't know about you or other patients or other listeners, there were some people that said some really weird things to me, or like,
Of course.
yeah, and you're
Mhm.
just like, did you just say that? That's
Mhm.
the kind of stuff that, I would write in my journal and process and then be like, nope, I'm going to go with me. I'm going to go with what I decide. I'm going to go with what I believe and what I feel. And that's how I built the trust. I mean, lots of other ways. I think trust also with yourself gets built with small wins.
Yes.
But the journaling and the keep making small decisions that you continue to agree with yourself builds trust with yourself.
Excellent points. How would you describe your experience as a caregiver in one word, if you can do it in one word?
Beautiful. It really was. What a gift. I get really weepy about it. I feel so honored, as hard as it was and as scary as it was. I still think there was incredible beauty in that vulnerability and seeing my mom, who, was a really powerful, humble leader. But to
Mhm.
see her at her weakest, actually, I thought was really beautiful because it helps me with my own daughter today to understand that you don't always have to be the strong one. You can be the vulnerable one. And, I had the opportunity to be there and hold her hand as she took her last breath. You might just think that's the worst moment of my life. Yeah, absolutely. But also one of the most beautiful ones in that I got the chance to say goodbye and I got to be there in that moment of transition, from this world to the other. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. It was this phrase I love, brutal
Mm.
and beautiful combination, brutal.
I love that. And just having the honor to show up for your mother and be there for her the way she's always been there for you, that is a huge blessing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I think it's a really beautiful opportunity to give back to somebody.
Mhm. What tips or advice do you have for women and caregivers?
Ooh, I always say for women, you have to realize you are not alone. A breast cancer or any cancer diagnosis can feel so isolating. And because you feel like no one will understand, no one will know what I'm going through. And that is true because everyone's journey is unique. But as I learned by, this other woman who, I met at work and through so many other women, you are not alone. Yeah. I mean, that one, even when you feel like you are not. That's advice. And the advice I would give is to be vulnerable because that's when doors open and that's when opportunities get created. I think for caregivers, because I've been one and I've been the recipient of caregiving,
Yes.
there's also the element of taking care of yourself, right? If you're a caregiver, be sure to take care of yourself because what do they say? Put on your oxygen mask first before helping others. Super hard to do. And I wasn't always the best at it. And I probably burnt the candle at both ends a couple of times. So I would say make sure if you're a caregiver to take care of yourself too. And also to let the patient make their own decisions. I had to watch my mom make decisions that maybe I didn't agree with, and I had to let her do that. And that built trust between us.
I love that you mentioned that because that's one thing that a lot of people forget because they want the best for the person that they're caring for. But I think, making sure your loved one, the person you're caring for has and remains and keeps their autonomy is so important.
100%. Yeah. And that's a gift that you can give.
Erica, what has been your greatest accomplishment since you were diagnosed with breast cancer?
Mm. Ooh, I mean, you might think that my biggest accomplishment, maybe it is publishing the book about my journey, right? But my decision to share my journey so vulnerably, right? The book that I've written contains photos. I wanted to replicate the experience I had in the bathroom for other women, right? And so that to me was quite the accomplishment because, I had to, literally share my most vulnerable and intimate moments. So that feels like an accomplishment. But the thing I love the most, and I'm probably the most proud of, is the one-on-one conversations that I've had with women who have either read the book or have been newly diagnosed. I live for direct service, right? It's what I do in my job at work. I love to help other people because I have been helped so much. So, my greatest accomplishment is probably the number of women who have become friends through this journey and that I've been able to support. Again, whether they make the decision about a mastectomy or they choose just the lumpectomy, but the beauty and the vulnerability of those friendships and conversations have probably been my greatest joy.
Wonderful. Your book is called The Mastectomy I Always Wanted. I understand it, but tell us more about, why you chose that title and what it means.
For me, the reason I chose it is I wanted to let women understand that you always have a choice. So, yes, I say I had been under high scrutiny for so many years that it was ultimately, I wanted to have the mental fears gone. So I wanted to have that mastectomy, but it was because it was a choice. And once I decided that my mastectomy was not a punishment for getting breast cancer, it was an opportunity to save my life, right? Those are two different ways of looking at the exact same experience, right? You could view it as a victim, you could view it as like, I have no choice, I have to have a mastectomy. And that's going to really be one of the mindsets. That's probably a negative mindset. But a positive mindset is I am powerfully choosing this. Even though it stinks, even though it's hard, even though it's painful, but I am choosing it because I am choosing my life. I am choosing a cancer free body. I'm choosing a cancer free mindset. If you can make that mindset shift, like, oh my gosh, well, this is the choice I always wanted to make. I always wanted to save my life, you can end up in a much healthier mindset and mind space as you go through the hard times. So I wanted to make the title of the book a little controversial, right? So
Mhm.
you kind of raise an eyebrow like, what? This is something you wanted? But I just want people to really think about mindset and mental health when you think about breast cancer journey, not just about the physicality of it.
That's a great point. Mindset is everything. It's so important and it plays a huge part in one's outcome as well. So I think
It
you
does.
chose a great title.
Thank you. Yeah, it does raise an eyebrow at times, but that's why, because I want women to say, or caregivers, hey, what's this about? And then I want them to read it. And the good news is I always laugh. I made this book intentionally short because the last thing that a woman facing a newly diagnosed breast cancer, journey, they don't have a lot of time. And so I just want women to raise an eyebrow, take a look at the book, read it in an hour or less, and then make their own choices because
E
it is power.
Exactly. I agree. And thank you, Erica, for writing the book. I had an opportunity to read it, and it is very informative. I appreciate the photos. Hopefully, I never get breast cancer, but if someone I know says they've been diagnosed, I will refer them to your book because I learned so much. And you're right, it's under 200 pages, but packed with information, packed with honesty, vulnerability, all the things that can really help you start to make the right choice for yourself and move through the journey. Where can people find your book, Erica, if they're interested?
It's available on Amazon. So just search under the mastectomy I always wanted, or they can go to my website, which is my full name, ericaneubertcampbell.com. And I also say if you want to learn about the book on the website, you can, but I also even have top 10 tips for preparing for a mastectomy. It's a free download on my website too. So I really just want to encourage women to get some of those resources. I also have lots of links to other nonprofits that also offer free resources for women facing breast cancer. So please visit the website too.
And the website is
EricaNeubertCampbell.com. Such a
wonderful.
funny EricaCampbell.com. Do not go there because there is a former porn star named Erica Campbell. It will redirect you to Penthouse. So please do not go there. It is very awkward. Yeah. What are the chances? There's also Erica Campbell, the very famous gospel singer. So I am somewhere in between the former porn star and the gospel singer. Somewhere in the middle is me, EricaNeubertCampbell.com.
Okay, wonderful. I will put that information in the show notes as well. This is a special episode for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. What does Breast Cancer Awareness Month mean to you?
Oh, it means please, please, please don't put off your mammogram. I know your life is busy, but early detection truly saves lives. And, I was so grateful to be under high scrutiny and getting my annual mammograms. Was caught early and I've had a great outcome. I know that COVID set off a lot of women from their regular checkups and regular mammograms. Please, the awareness piece for me is just make sure you make that appointment.
Thank you for sharing that, Erica. So important. And finally, if you could have an intimate conversation with cancer in 1 to 2 sentences, what would you say?
I would say, Cancer, you are the club I never wanted to belong to, but I met some fabulous people while I was there. And you did not take anything from me. You only gave me more than what I could have ever imagined.
Beautiful. Beautiful. As we wrap up, Erica, is there anything else you'd like to say to the listeners that you have not had an opportunity to share?
The three mantras that I live by are number one, you are not alone. Number two, trust yourself. And number three, never give up. And so if you only remember those three things from today, those are the things. You are not alone, trust yourself, and never give up.
All very important. Thank you, Erica, for sharing that. I will have Erica's information in the show notes. Be sure to check out www.ericaneubertcampbell.com. And I will have this all spelled out. You can also find her on Facebook, Instagram as well. And I'll have all that information there. I must say, Erica, thank you so much for your time, for sharing your important story, for being so vulnerable and open with us all. I appreciate you and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much, Talaya. And thank you to all your listeners. I'm really grateful.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Erica. I want to repeat the question again for the listeners out there. What were you able to take away from this episode that can help you along your breast cancer journey? And if you have any tips for those facing breast cancer that you would like to share, please send that information over to nctpodcastfan@gmail.com. You can also comment on LinkedIn and Spotify. And if you share, I may read your comments on an upcoming episode. Before we end, I'd like to give a shout out to the Navigating Cancer Together community and valued listeners. Thank you so much for joining us. If you believe that the heart centered work that I'm doing is important, and you have found joy, you have found valuable information in this podcast, please buy me a coffee. Actually, it's a green tea. If you found this helpful and it has provided you some guidance on your cancer journey, please visit buymeacoffee.com/NCT podcast. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/NCT podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. That is it for this Wednesday. And until next time, let's keep navigating cancer together. Take care.